Okay, good morning, everyone. This is the August 3rd general meeting for the Ventura River Watershed Council. We have several amazing presentations to get through today. So I would like to get started. If you have any comments, feel free to drop in the chat who you're with, who you're representing. And if at any point during the presentations you have a question, you can put it in the chat. We'll also have time at the end for raising your hand for questions as well. Other than that, is there anything anyone wants to say before we get started with the agenda? Okay, just good mornings. Okay, thank you. First, we have someone from the Office of a County Supervisor, and she's here to talk about an upcoming watershed event. So,
hi. Goodness. Hi, everybody. My name is Maruja. I work for Supervisor Matt Levere, the District 1 Supervisor for the County of Ventura. And we are holding our second annual Watershed Walk, October 14th. This is going to be located at the old Baldwin Trailhead up here in the Ojai Valley, off of Baldwin, north of the Honor Farm site, if you're interested, or if you're aware of that site. We're going to have on-site biologists to talk about the flora, fauna, biota in the watershed. The walk will be an approximately 2-mile walk. Half of it will be ADA accessible. So if people have mobility impairments, there is a portion that they can do. We're looking to reach out to younger kids, students who are studying this, both in college or, budding environmentalists, to really get some good questions and in-field education of what we have in our own backyard. So if you are interested, we have a little save the dates here. I don't know if you can see this, but you could email district1@ventura.org, or you can call us at 805-654-2703 just to get on the list, and we'll send you updates as we get closer to that event. But we're going to have pop-ups from Public Works involving our Matilaha Dam ecosystem restoration project, or also the dam removal project. So we'll have a lot of other informational stations, question and answers, and we'll probably have some donuts and bagels and coffee too. So we hope to see you there. Again, this is Maruja with Matt Levere's office at the county, and you can email us at district1, numerical 1, @ventura.org. So thank you so much for having us.
Someone's asking, can they get that email again?
District1, so DISTRICT 1, the number 1, @ventura.org. Cool. Thank you.
Okay, and we're going to type that into the chat.
Oh, cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Is it possible, like, if an organization wanted to have a booth or something?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I guess for a little more background, I don't need to turn the camera back on me. I mean, I don't want to make anybody dizzy. But last year we had it in the Santa Clara Rivershed.
Yeah.
And so we had Friends of Santa Clara River there. We had the Department of Fish and Wildlife there. We had, there was a couple other, Friends of Santa Clara River, Public Works. But yes, we welcome any nonprofits, other environmentally minded groups that want to showcase their projects and what they're working on.
Yeah.
By all means, let us know, reach out. That way we can carve out a little space for your booth or your materials within our general presentation area.
And it's free.
And it's free.
Oh, it's free. Okay, cool.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll definitely be trying to get a booth.
Yeah, please. And then with the MERITO Foundation here, getting your kids there to do, an educational project. We tried to do something with Cal State Channel Islands last year and their bio students, but it didn't materialize quick enough. There were some conflicting events. So we're really looking to get the students in these kinds of forums, as well as the general public, but to really, we're going to have a biologist from Padre touring with us to call out species in the field and answer questions as we migrate through this 2-mile little fun hike.
So is this going to be similar to the one last year?
Yes, just in a different location.
Okay.
But lessons learned, we're going to have more donuts and more bagels and hopefully more people.
Yeah, what was the attendance like last
Last year was about 20 people,
Okay,
which was a good group.
Yeah.
And we had a representative from,
especially because this was your first one.
yes, you know, so it was like a soft launch. But we had a biologist from Department of Fish and Wildlife do the tour, and it was really informative for everybody there. Even the staff who came, you know, we all went on the hike together, and it was a really enriching experience, I think, for all of us. And it helps activate these public spaces, you know, which can sometimes tend to have unsavory activity, I like to call. And
Yeah.
so we want to really activate our watersheds, you know, get out in the field literally and learn about these wonderful things within our own backyard. So it's a really cool thing that we're trying to launch. So please spread on your various platforms and social media feeds.
Yeah, I'd be happy to share that in our next.
And I'll send you any graphics that you can then distribute to entities that want to also share it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Time again?
9 a.m. So we'll be setting up there at 8. The walk will start at 9, but you know, we will be there way before 8 setting up, but feel free to come as early as 8 to have some coffee, talk to people. The walk will be, you know, we're saying 9 to 11, but if chatter is happening beyond that, you know, there's no hard stop. So it's, we're here just to share good info.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, and then, was there a question?
Just wondering.
Oh, if that's up to the presenter. Yeah, I'm going to be seated for my thing because I need to click the slides. Next on the agenda, I want to briefly go over some upcoming grant opportunities and just share them with you guys. Could you, one moment while we figure out the 2 computers set up. And then you through Zoom. Can you stop? Let's just turn the camera up the thing and I'll talk through it. Okay, does that work? Okay. Yeah, that's cool. I can't really see it over Zoom. Let me one moment, everyone. There we go. Okay. Okay, so I will be going over some upcoming grant opportunities that I'm looking to explore for the Watershed Council. Okay. The first thing I want to kind of announce is that the Ventura County Resource Conservation District, we've also been given the coordinator position for the Santa Clara River Watershed as of kind of like last month. So we're working on the transition plan for that. And with that, it kind of gives more time to look over these climate type of watershed collaborative grants that can help kind of expand that, because now the extra funding from that kind of gives me additional hours that I can put towards exploring new grant opportunities. And one of the things that we talked about at a previous meeting with the surveys of our stakeholders was a couple goals of wanting to expand possible workshops we could do, especially like around certain topics, maybe subcommittees if we have any projects that we're looking to launch, as well as updating the website. So both the Santa Clara River Watershed and the Ventura River Watershed, both the websites have some old planning documents on it from past initiatives. And the Santa Clara especially has a whole database, but it hasn't been updated for like at least 7 years or so. And the Ventura River Watershed Management Plan that was last updated in 2015. And I would like to make the website a bit more current with like listing like what current projects are in the watershed. I have been asked that at a watershed event last year. I remember an official came and they were asking like, is there a place where I can just see a list of all the projects happening in the watershed? So these are projects that I keep in mind as I look for funding to help the Watershed Council. And I found a few. This one is a bit, the deadline is coming up. And I don't know if it's exactly a perfect fit, but I wanted to bring it to your guys' attention. It's administered through the Office of Planning and Research. It's for a 12 to 30 month period. It gets a little bit complicated with their set aside funding and then their competitive funding. So that's why it's kind of one of the ones I need to kind of tease out more information from and see how that'll fit with an application. They have 2 tracks, one for a planning and one for an implementation. So the planning grant would be just for investigating research, conduct community engagement, kind of get a plan going for what projects could be done. Is it not showing? We can send the slides afterwards. Yeah. And let me just check the Zoom real quick since people over Zoom are saying they're having, it shows on screen sharing. Okay, let me. Okay, there we go. Okay. We also have planning grants, which might be more what we're looking for unless a lot of our partners have projects that they're ready to launch. All the implementation tracks are for shovel-ready projects. Another one, and this is the one I think is the most promising and that I am beginning to work on an application for. It's funded by the Strategic Growth Council. It is really geared towards groups like ours. It has, it's for partnership development, plan development, technical assistance, and it's really to help kind of foster collaboratives that will be able to competitively go after grants. I'm going to be applying for this one. I've been approached by a couple groups to put together a pre-proposal this month, and I think this one is the best fit. But if I'm going to be working on it, I feel like I should also just be looking at tailoring it to the other grants as well, if I'm going through the effort. It's really for building social infrastructure, and I will be working on this with the Ventura County Community Foundation. They approached us. We applied for it last year and did not get it, but that we got, we're going to be looking at this again and applying for round 2. The other one is, this one just kind of came across my desk like last week. It's funded by NOAA. It's the Climate Resilience Regional Challenge, and it is the broadest funding opportunity under NOAA. It also funds collaboratives like the Watershed Council. You can, again, it's like a track 1 or track 2. One's for just expanding your capacity to have collaborative planning projects, and the other one is for if you have like a actual project or an adaptation plan that you're ready to put in. That one of my other coworkers is thinking of applying for, and I might just try and see if that's a good fit for any Watershed Council work as well. This one has a bit later of a due date in February. So if you are interested or you have thoughts that you'd like to share, we will be accepting. You can email venturawatershed@gmail.com to discuss. I'll be meeting with the Ventura County Community Foundation to discuss it late next week. So yeah, if you want to be involved or have any thoughts that you'd like to share, I more than welcome it. So thank you. Okay. Any questions? Okay, next. Oh, yeah, that's kind of what we were thinking after talking to you, Lynn, actually, but it'd be nice to include some of the more recent like climate studies and things like that in the watershed management plan and just kind of update it. So hopefully we will get funding this time. Next, I have the MERITO Foundation, and I have been bugging them to present for a while. So I'm so happy they were able to come this time. I would give them like the wrong date or the times would change. So we're very happy that this is working out. You guys provided me with, this is yours, right? Okay. I'm gonna plug in their presentation. Okay. There we go. And then I'm gonna do it. Screen sharing. And let's see. There you go. Okay. Yes. Okay. So you can just let me know if you need me to click or anything for you, okay? Oh, and let me move the microphone. Do you want the camera on you or?
Just the very beginning.
Okay.
Introduce myself. Hey, well, hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for attending. Thank you, Edie and Desiree, I'm sorry, for inviting us today. We've been looking forward, but our really busy time is the spring. I'm Rocio Lozano. I'm the executive director for the MERITO Foundation. And here is Leslie.
Hi, I'm
Hi.
Leslie McDonough with the MERITO Foundation as well.
Okay, so MERITO is a nonprofit organization. We're based in Ventura, California. Our office is, which by the way, if anyone knows about offices, we've been asked to move. Our building was purchased and we're looking for offices, but
How
up to
big is
now,
your staff?
we are 5, although sometimes the busy times we have interns.
Okay.
We're looking like 1,000 to 1,200 square feet.
Okay.
So if anybody knows, is desperately looking, yes. But we're on Market Street, but we've been we work with primarily Ventura County youth, but also Northern Santa Barbara County, and work with a lot of educators and different stakeholders, including Ventura Water, one of our partners and clients. And if you want to show on the next slide, our mission is to protect the ocean. Education is one of the tools, it's not the only one. So our mission is ocean protection by providing transformative experiences through education, hands-on conservation, like habitat restoration, scientific research, like monitoring, and advocacy, and green entrepreneurship. So that's how we do it. The education part is kind of the mesh that holds everything out together. Our team is formed of myself, oceanographer, marine biologist, environmental scientists, with experience in some level on outreach of education. And another very important component is obviously stakeholder engagement. So it sounds horrible, but through the youth, we get to the adults. So the ladies from the county already left, but yeah, we definitely have, so they draw and they're really good at convincing. So that's kind of their strategy. Then the next slide, if you see there's our foundation, our members were local people. MERITO is an acronym for Multicultural Education for Resource Issues Threatening Oceans. a mouthful that I didn't come up with a name. It's kind of a legacy from, no, it was originally a program from Office of Natural and Marine Sanctuaries. So started in 2005 in Ventura. So, you know, it was a program for the Channel Island Natural Marine Sanctuary, and then we became a nonprofit in 2014. So almost 10 years. Yes.
Congrats.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, we have to do something next year. So we'll do our ocean issues we address are urban runoff. So we're working with organizations such as yours and Ventura Water, because everything drains in the ocean, climate change, obviously, and oceanification, believe it or not, our program was one of the first with a NOAA that developed materials for oceanification, plastic pollution, and loss of coastal habitats. So there are 5 primary ocean or environmental issues we address through the various strategies. And in the next slide, you will see our area is depending on the different strategy, whether it's stakeholder engagement, a forum, or it's a training teachers, or it's monitoring the river. It depends. So we work with local communities to different like issues. I will say the Matilija Dam, raising awareness about their need to remove it and collecting data on water quality. Then we work with the Ventura Unified School District, Ventura Water. But we're working with Ormond Beach, and then we're working with City of Oxnard currently. We work with them in restoring community parks and getting the neighborhoods involved in the design to make them more resilient to climate change.
I
So-
just have a question. Do you feel like your time is spent like half Santa Barbara, half Ventura, or?
Originally, when we started, it was actually half and half. And in the last 3 years since the pandemic, just things shifted, and partnership became stronger with some organizations, say with Ventura and Ventura. So now it become more focused, like watershed, Ventura River Watershed, and City of Oxnard. So we're now working as with Santa Barbara. I think the same thing happened in Santa Barbara and other regions. In Santa Barbara City, we work based on needs of the communities. So they're not so much needs because there's so much funding.
Yeah.
Most of the services are free. We work through grants. So I feel your pain. And they're seeing the slides, right? They're not seeing me.
Yeah,
Okay, good. Okay, so the work is hard, but we get to choose who to work with. And it's very, very satisfying. We work with communities and issues that, so they do a lot of needs assessment and community assessments, and that's what we work with. So in Santa Barbara, they're pretty well served, basically. So we work with Santa Maria, Lompoc, Guadalupe, but not so much the city. It's been more than 3 years for sure. The city of Santa Barbara has got their own networks, and they're a lot of octopuses with a lot of arms.
Next slide.
Yes, yes. So here's our pillars: community input to design any project, any program. We do needs assessments first through surveys, outreach, forums. We're collecting data. That's one thing I learned from the very beginning in 2005, working with NOAA. So the second is then building in capacity. So education is really capacity building, whether it's for youth. We do not work with little younger children, so it's 4 through 12, all the way to college through internships, and a lot of educators, building educators' capacity. And well, not the foundation, but myself, done a lot on marine protected areas capacity building abroad. So, and then youth participation. So it's working with youth that, as I said, we involve them in whether monitoring scientific research, data collection, or habitat restoration. And then just working towards workforce development through opportunities, giving opportunities to youth in leadership, career pathways, and green entrepreneurship. So I'm going to give you a few examples, and then Leslie will share others. This is a recent forum we helped. We're hired by Ojalá Conservancy to help them involve the community on the avenue on the vision for the Ventura River once the dam is removed. which I just got back from the Climate Adaptations Forum 2023
Yeah.
in Pomona yesterday. That's why I sound and I am exhausted.
Oh.
But it was, I presented with Stan Beaches and we had a presentation. It was really well attended and to hear from him, okay, 2030 is going to be the year this dam is going to come down, hopefully. But there's a lot of work already involved in the vision of how it's going to look like. I mean, I don't need to let you know, you're the Watershed Council, you know more than me, but so we got involved, the committee of the Avenue, on February of this year. So we were approaching how we would do it, and Tom and Emily was pretty cool and said, well, how would you do it, Rocio? Just tell me. Well, this is what we're planning. They have a plan, so we work with SALT and just tweaking things to fit the needs, the culture values, the community. And they allowed us to tweak anything from the flyers to the messaging, and we had a pretty good turnout. It was so part of what I presented was on that, like a lot of on this forum, it was like how to engage the communities. I mean, so much of the funding, like these grants you were talking about, there are requirements which are, okay, you really need to reach out to the underserved communities and the disadvantaged communities, which are often the ones that are most impacted. So that's part of what we do. And it was nice, refreshing. It was a very, very cool, diverse in all senses. A lot of women driven this forum. It was, you should have been. That was cool.
Next slide.
Yes, please. So there's just some images on how we try to engage our communities, making our messaging, not just materials, accessible, inclusive, engaging, understandable, multi-generational, pleasant. So for instance, let's have a taco truck, right? Do it at the place where they would go, at the times they can go. Not what, like most of these people are working people, might have 2 jobs and don't have time to go. Like to city councils, is that's why there's not a representation. This is working hours, so the only retired people can go, and if it's not a grandma who's take care of the kids for their children, then they can't go out. So that's just an example. The next slide is more on some of the surveys I mean, I don't want to take credit. SALT did a great job, the landscape architects. But we had to speak maps and the people could come and give their feedback and look at them. And it was really cool to see people from the avenue say, I've never been to the dam. I want to be, I grew up, I was born, my family is too much heritage. And say, we want to be able to see. So we're like, okay, what do you want to see? So here's some examples. Signage, yeah, we want educational programs. We need them to be something in Spanish. I mean, ways to get there, bus. So it was kind of cool. It was a good experience. But the SALT did a great job at creating the materials for them to be able to visualize and see.
So they created the materials for.
So we worked together so that during the forum they were ready. So we had tables, a big room at Bell Arts, and then people walked around and gave feedback. And they were like, we finished it, we're still there. So that was real. So we had a corner with like for children, so they could come with the children, they could be painting. So we gave them the information in Spanish and they wanted it in English. Some people are like, whoa, I'm Latino, but I just feel like more comfortable, but my first language is really English. So we had both. So it worked really well. So with that information now, Ohio Land Conservancy is SALT, and they're planning on doing more. And so if you show the next slide, I'll jump to take. So I'm going to talk a little about capacity building, and Steven here has been in several of our trainings. We work closely with Ventura Water to train science teachers in our area how to bring watershed education, climate science, and ocean science, and energy literacy as well to the schools, the public schools. So we bribe them by taking them to cool trips to Santa Cruz Island, and it's a bribe and get scientists on board and do plankton tows with microscopes and ROVs and just get the lectures from like Ventura Water and talk about the plants and for adaptation for the city of Ventura. And they go excited. We work with UC Davis, Center for Community and Science. So Ryan Myers had been camp that was here with us last year and the year before. we've developed, and I'll have Leslie more talk about it. We have a youth manual for citizens for the Ventura River Watershed. We'd love to share with you. It was never finalized, but whatever version we have, we're happy to have it, and we'll show some of the objectives. But that took a lot of me calling different stakeholders, finding out what are the research priorities, conservation priorities, and outlining in them. And then so what we do, go to the teachers, science teachers, to say, what are these science standards you need to teach? What are these scientific priorities, monitoring priorities, conservation priorities, match and find, so they choose from our curricula those lesson plans that teach those concepts, and we take them out in the field to collect data. So we have kids in the participation of the collection. It's not perfect. A lot of stakeholders say, well, that data is, I don't know if it's been going through all the quality assurance, but we're working on that. So it's a process. So the youth, how we involve them in all these under the umbrella of education, which, as I mentioned, includes community science as well as advocacy and or hands-on habitat restoration. I'm going to pass it to Leslie to talk about it more in detail. Can you see
Hello
her?
again. Yeah, as best as it'll be. So I'm going to go over some of the educational programs that the MERITO Foundation is currently leading. So if you click on the next slide, please. So the two programs that I'll be going over involve, they both involve hands-on scientific research and habitat restoration along the Ventura River Watershed. So our first program, which is in the next slide, is called the Ventura River Action Network Program, also known as VRAN. And this started in 2021 and will be culminating next year. So we just finished our second year of the program. And it is sponsored by Noah B. Wet, Ventura Water, who Rocio mentioned, we have a representative here today, and UC Davis Center of Community and Citizen Science. And it's a partnership between Ventura Unified School District, the MERITO Foundation, UC Davis, to involve 6th through 12th grade science teachers in our program. So we work with middle school and high school teachers to involve their students in field experiences that involve habitat restoration, environmental monitoring. This program is specifically focused for the Ventura River Watershed in support of the removal of the Matilaha Dam. So the focus of this program really is citizen science, environmental monitoring, and I'll be kind of going over some of the activities that we, the goals and activities that we have for this program. And so this is one of our programs. And then the second one that we have currently is in the next slide. So this is called From the Avenue to the Channel Islands. This is a newer program. We just finished the first year of 3 years that we'll be leading it, also known as ATSI. And this is sponsored by California State Parks. And this is a partnership between the MERITO Foundation, City of Ventura Sustainability Division, what am I missing? Once Upon a Watershed / crew, and we're working with all 6th through 8th grade students of De Anza Middle School, which is on the avenue in an area that is very underserved. And this program focuses more on outdoor recreation and outdoor access to underserved communities and students, and supports the initiative of California Governor Newsom's Outdoor Access for All. So although this is a little bit more focused on outdoor recreation, we do involve our students in ocean environmental science. We still have topics along the Ventura River and its issues, and it still involve them in environmental monitoring and citizen science as well. This one will be culminating in 2025. Yeah, it's a three-year program. Mm-hmm. So in our next ones, these are some of the sample activities that we lead on our field experiences. This doesn't involve all of them, but we involve our students in marine debris and microplastic monitoring, sandy beach and rocky intertidal monitoring as part of the NOAA's Limpets program, water quality monitoring, bird ID and census. We also do a native plant ID along with a hike using iNaturalist, as well as macroinvertebrate monitoring. So these are just some of the ones that we lead. There's a lot more activities that teachers can choose as well. And so this chart here was originally created
to help with our VRAN teachers and coordinating their field experiences. But it's a great way to visualize our monitoring goals, where we can do them, what activities are tied to them, location of the Ventura River. So we've divided it by estuary/lower Ventura River watershed, and then mid and then upper Ventura River watershed. So this was created as part of the manual that Rocio was talking about, the citizen science manual for the Ventura River watershed. And these goals were pulled from that, talking to stakeholders, seeing what we wanted to see before the removal of the Matilaha Dam. So some of the monitoring goals are repeated. For example, like water quality, we'd like to collect water quality data along the Ventura River to view the quality of the river water throughout the year and throughout several years before the removal of the Matilaha Dam, and then be able to have that data collected or that data collection and be able to refer to it after the removal of the Matilaha Dam, as well as eradicating invasive species through habitat restoration, our bird ID and census, microplastics at the beach, doing beach cleanups there as well. And then this year this past school year, we were able to offer a couple trips to visit the Matilaha Dam, which was very special for our students, and before the rain, of course. And we had crew be able to take our students out there, specifically for our VRAN students, which is focused on the removal of the Matilaha Dam. But yeah, this is a great chart to kind of visualize what our monitoring goals are and how we're accomplishing them through our activities and some of the organizations that we work with. So the past couple of years, we worked with Santa Barbara Channel Keeper, as well as Ventura Land Trust to help meet these goals, which are stakeholders, of course. And in our next one, this is also part of the chart. We also involve Ventura Water because they are one of our sponsors for the VRAM program. And really support us in any of the educational programs that we have. We also offer a trip to visit the reclamation facility. And although the reclamation facility sits on the Santa Clara River estuary, all of the concepts and topics that are discussed during our activities are heavily focused on City of Ventura residents, how they collect their water, which we know is through the Ventura Water. And we go over water quality and bird ID and census as well. So again, even though it's on the Santa Clara River estuary, our topics are very focused on the Ventura River watershed. So yeah, these are some of the activities that we have there at the reclamation facility, and they do such a great job to connect those topics back to the Ventura River. And so we just wanted to add some of the data sheets that we use to collect our data. So this first one is a marine debris collection. We use NOAA's survey debris data sheets, and we're able to add this onto their website and their collection of data. And then our next one is the one that we use for water quality testing. So some of the parameters that we test are pH, dissolved oxygen, conductivity, turbidity, nitrate, and phosphates. And going back to that chart of the monitoring goals, we can do water quality really anywhere that we have access to water. So it's been really interesting to have students collect water at the upper Ventura River watershed, where it's way more pristine and less impacted by humans, compared to other parts of the river where there's more human impact. So, and being able to compare those results as well. So water quality is always a big, one of the most commonly chosen by our teachers. And then we also have our bird ID and census data collection. We have different varieties of this data sheet, including ones that are focused more on coastal birds, which we can use at the Ventura River estuary and lower parts of the Ventura River. And also other data sheets that we can use for more inland birds. And just depending on where we're going to be doing bird IDing and the census, we'll choose that data sheets. And then this is an example of how we collect our data. So we'll have the students participate in the activity, and then we'll go back to our office and plug in this data into a data sheet. And then eventually this data is then plugged into, I believe it's in the next slide. So it'll be one more, but this is, we're working on getting our data collection onto FieldScope, which is a platform that has map-based data collection. It supports citizen science projects. I think it's global, right? Or is it just the US? I think it's just US then. Where different organizations and projects can plug in their data so that it's accessible for the public. And it also helps analyze trends and patterns. And this will be really helpful for after the removal of the Matilaha Dam. And so essentially is MERITO Foundation will have its own page with projects that are specific to what we do. So we're trying to get our water quality data on there, as well as our marine debris and our bird census data on here, so that people from the community or the public who wants to access that data has access to it, including our teachers, the teachers that we work with, and being able to do lesson plans and more on that.
Do data visualization analysis. They can graph, they can take sets of data from this time to this time. They can see the data they collect. So that's one of the goals too. It becomes a lot more meaningful, and they take more care on how to collect.
Yeah.
Is FieldScope, is that a free account that you?
No, we have to pay for it. It's complicated to read the data too. So we're struggling a little bit with it, but we'll be done by the end of.
Yeah, I was about to
August.
ask our biologist. I was like, where is it?
They have a lot of projects like Frog USA and Chesapeake Bay or project. That's really interesting, good projects. So once you get the understand the interface is not the easiest for the user, the end user, yeah, but to fit in the data, it's not fun.
More
So
complicated.
Jesse also works has been struggling with it, but we're so busy during the school year
Yeah.
too. So this is our time to
We're
not all those loose ends. Yeah, so it's just we were just talking about it yesterday. So it'll be done by end of this semester finish.
So these are just examples of how our citizen science monitoring and how youth contribute to data collection. So we plug in our information onto eBird, as well as the marine debris monitoring assessment through NOAA, as well as through limpets for our rocky and intertidal monitoring.
So these are large databases. There are like NOAA marine debris. You got your phone, you can take a photo, eBird. I've been at Cornell University, the masters of community science. So now it was not citizen science, but it's community. But so these are easy and that we plug our data there. What we've struggled with, I want to mention, is with local stakeholders that they're more resistant to. They were open to give other priorities, monitoring priorities, conservation priorities. We're aware, okay, but then when it's come, okay, here's the data that kids collected. There's just this fear on. I'm not sure what it is, to be honest. Like you were there when it was collected. So I'm an open book. I'm old enough to learn. There's no time to lose. So that is where we honestly struggle with, like having ideal is the goal that the data collected by non-citizen, non-scientists, public participation, scientific research. That's a goal to inform, right? But policy to inform management. But that's where that's what we want to get. That's our goal.
Yeah.
So you know. Big organizations are using our data.
Yeah.
It's the smaller ones that.
And so along with the environmental monitoring, we also have focus on habitat restoration. So earlier this year, we led a field trip to San Buenaventura State Beach with De Anza Middle School students, 7th grade, to do dune restoration at that California State Beach. And the next slide shows the Calama wetland restoration, which happened from 2020 to 2022. And this was more community involved where we had students that were participating in marine science themed beach camps, summer beach camps that
During the
occurred
pandemic.
during the pandemic. We offered these services to our local communities to be able to do restoration at the Calorama wetland, which also is also within the boundaries of San Buenaventura State Beach. This is just left of the Ventura Pier. So this is one of the examples of habitat restoration.
Which is the bottom of the Ventura River.
Mhm. And so these are just some of the activities that we've held in this past 2 years. Water quality, like I mentioned, is a commonly chosen one by our teachers. Habitat restoration in the Ventura River watershed, bird ID and census activities. We were able to do some microplastics and marine debris collection at the beach, as well as sandy beach and rocky intertidal monitoring. And got to do 4 visits to the Matilha Dam in December. So it's a little bit of what we have done at the Ventura River watershed.
And these field activities include anything from 30 to 60 students.
Mhm. And so the next,
Can I
Six,
ask,
seven,
what age group, your most popular programs, what age group tends to request water quality monitoring and what age group requests bird ID?
for both of those, it's pretty much the same for middle school and high school. We primarily work with middle school and high school with those 2 programs that we mentioned.
Okay.
And many times in one field experience, we'll do water quality and bird ID. So it'll be like a rotation of activities. So wherever we could do water quality, most of the time we could do bird ID as well. So they're pretty much tied together. But we have teachers who love IDing birds and doing census, so they really want their students to be involved in it as well. But it's pretty much the same with middle school and high school. Yes, this is Rosia will talk about our annual ECOA challenge and how that's connected to our advocacy.
So, because we know not all youth wants us going to be a scientist or engineer, that we have a realm. We have a program. It's a competition. It's a STEAM competition called ECOA for energy efficiency to mitigate climate change and ocean acidification. So I started this program through a fellowship I did with EPA and NWA in 2015. A way of involving the community, in this case, youth as well, in again, climate resilience. So the competition has 4 different strands or tiers. Was students creating proposals on how to reduce the carbon footprint of the schools during COVID with either their houses. We get an average of 85 to 110 entries per year, teams of students. And we've dispersed close to $50,000 in cash prizes. So there's cash involved. They get a big check. We've had, 3 years ago, Supervisor Steve Bennett was one of our keynote speakers. We've had now Superintendent Antonio Castro last year. This year we had founder and 5 gyres keynote speakers. And we have, Ventura Water has been part of this all along supporting this event. There's 4 tiers. The first tier is energy efficiency, water conservation. 3rd is waste reduction, and the 4th is advocate for an issue. And last 2 years have been advocating for the removal of the Matilha Dam and informing others in their community. Obviously, it's about letting the kids, and they love it. So we've had really good projects. The kids worked for months. The Pupusese is creating, we have a workbook we've created, which is like a mini business plan. And they have to do audit their school for energy, for water or waste, or a community, how much they know about, say, what do you know about the Matilha Dam? What are the impacts of having a dam, a relic dam, 100,000 metric tons of sand, and then our beaches eroded. So we informed, so before they do this project, they go through all these scientific concepts, field trips, etc. And then they create a project at the end of the school year, and then they submitted entries, and we're always looking for volunteers. So I wanted to we wanted to mention this project or this program almost. This is an 8th year. We just had it. We're going for the 9th next year because we're only looking for judges to have. They can be background in business, environmental science, or engineers, or education, or a policy. It doesn't really, and we've been lucky. We had great judges last year. Sometimes the problem is they say, I'll do it, and then they don't show up. And then that's where it's, we had that last year. Now my husband, here, you're a judge. Go. But we had projects where like 2 years ago, these 2 girls from Buena High School, and the teacher helped them. We went to the Matilda Dam, interviewed Paul Jenkins and tell his story about the dam, and it went viral. I believe Research Legacy Fund really liked their project. So we have that one. There's in the website, you can see there's a hyperlink there. So we select with volunteer judges, and that's harder even to review, say 100 proposals with a rubric, and then the 16 make it to the final. And then at an open space, we just did it at Poinsettia Pavilion. It worked really well. They're like a science fair. They show their projects to all these judges. We explain to the judges how to judge, which is the second cohort. And then we get finals, and they receive cash prizes, in-kind prizes. We've received, if you have anything you can give to kids, would be great. Like Ventura Water has been awesome. Like even just like bags from the city, and like we Island Packers, great supporter. We get them tickets to go. And they like the recognition. I mean, honestly, but the most important, and I would love help with, is we want the school districts the school district in this case to implement some of those projects. Clean Power Alliance is one of our biggest sponsors last year for these. They're great to work with. Love working with them too. I mean, we have these common goals, everybody, and we have a captive audience. So we don't give everything we've explained to you to all of them. The teachers play an incredible role that they want to be involved. They have to. They don't. It's not part of the job. We do give small stipends, but this is not because the reason they do it. So they have to integrate the time for the professional development, to go on our trainings, to get the curriculum inserted in there, to build the time. They're very squeezed with everything they have to do to bring these real issues to the instructional plan, to allow us to take them on the field, to have all this. So it's a lot of layers, and they all involve. So what I like is to break that we just do education. Now there's a lot more. There's participation in research, and first of all, learning about the local issues of that affect our communities in the big scale as well as the small. Like how important it is to have a river, the contribution of sand that has been held in our beaches, which are being eroded as sea level is rising. So they're making all those connections. And that's our goal. So it takes village. So we're always open for collaboration, partnerships, funding, writing grants together. I mean, you name it. I'm a workaholic.
I can tell. So busy.
And now my youngest is going to college. I'm like, yep, even more. But a great team to work with, and working with Leslie and Jose and Jesse and partners has been really great. So that's just this last slide. I think we just have a few of our partners. That's just some of the examples. We're taking a lot of your time. If you are interested, our website for the Aqua Challenge with specific projects made by students. In our YouTube channel, we have loads, like tons of them. So 16 winners every year for the last 8 years. And if you scroll on the next one, there's some of our partners. I apologize, not everyone's there, but then the fund would get really small. But some of the ones we've worked with. Some of you work more with some than others, and we come back for the most part, which is nice. Like I haven't worked with Cal State as a boating center for a while, and we're looking forward to working again. Right now, focus a lot of where we work here, but working very close with CBOX, and as I mentioned, Public Works. There's a lot of work to be done. I think we don't intend to resolve the big problems of the world or our communities, but to work with you to do it together.
And there's your email.
And that is my email, and I told her to include hers, and she just said like, no, have them.
We were
email you." But thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you so much. Let's see if we have any questions. If you have a question, you can raise your hand or you can pop in the chat.
Oh,
Not
sorry, I want to mention one thing. We are recruiting teachers for our VRAN program. So if you want to have more information, you can go onto our website.
Cool.
They receive curriculum, a $1,500 stipend, the participation, training, and we cover the buses and everything on the staff. And so all we want them to enroll, and we have some.
Yeah, those bus fees are, oh yeah, always the big.
Well,
the big pain to
because
get.
we work with the school district is very reasonable. So we have a grant that we wrote, but the fiscal administration actually is the district, so the buses are covered through lobby.
Okay, someone from Cal Trout is saying that these projects are very cool. Yeah, thank you for your presentation.
Welcome. Some students did a great project last year about the still of listing the steelhead
Yeah.
in the California EPA endangered species. I'm working with Cal Trout. We just connected them. It was awesome.
Awesome,
Thanks for
very
giving
cool.
me
Thank you. Yeah, do you have a question? Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for your energy. Thanks for the work. It's great here. Making this with people, teachers, and city workers, advocates that I want to send you.
That'd be awesome.
So we're awesome. There's some bilingual teachers. Probably aren't. It seems like you're doing a lot for a small organization. And it's system science stuff and field work is cool. But also I'm impressed that you're facilitating existing organizations to access and interact with markets. That's a huge need. It's very partial. I'm very glad to hear that you're doing asking for that. That's new. I'm not just I'm just curious. I was looking at the list of collaborators, whether you're also collaborating with advocacy marine organizations like Buzz, Shooting Marine Sanctuary, movements, even Patagonia, and the Schumacher and how those things that the Watershed Council trying to build collaboration very soon.
Well, isn't evolving? I'm sure there's been emails that I respond, clicked on them on my phone, and then I got back to them because I don't know how to put them in bold again. What I'm saying is, like,
I do.
I'm sure. So I try not to answer email by my phone, but our network, like I've been trying to, and the I can't remember terrible names. My hard drive is full, so I have to like exactly. But we're working with Patagonia. We're going to be doing a monthly beach cleanup with them, the Rumble, and so we're supposed to start actually last July, but Raúl got hurt. Patagonia, so the end of this month, so everyone's invited. We'd like to tweak, believe that we're working with someone else before, so we're going to take that on, which is being hard for us because we're very small, but we're going to work with them.
Because I'm one of the people on my list, it's the chief equity officer of Patagonia.
Oh, great. Yeah, so
You're already Patagonia.
with Sam and Pantoja and Vanessa Padilla. So we're going to do that. We want to add microplastics. So in these conversations with UC, University of Southern California, seek grants, see if we can implement more. The difference with other organizations, we focus a lot on prevention and research. So we're trying to talk about, we don't really need beach clubs. We need more research. Like microplastics particularly. So that's one of the things that'll be changing a little bit. We also ask, yeah, we'll do these monthly cleanups, gatherings, but we want to involve the community of the app. So we want to have like promoting it and be more inclusive. So it's, but baby steps because we go small. I had to raise 2 kids along the way and building an organization. So now we're gonna do that. And we are being approached by the Chumash National Marine Sanctuary. So that's in our strategic plan. It's part of expansion. I want to work with them closely. I have a lot of 10 years of work with Chumash and Marine Sanctuary established. So I'd love to work with that. It's a matter of like this growing pains. We have to have more staff and
Yeah.
train them, baby steps, but definitely I will, can't remember his name, but I'm in conversations with one of the leaders, the Chumash leaders. As for cost, I've tried reaching out to them, to say that it hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, we'll all take it in too. Are you in with Eric Hummel at the city of Oxford?
Yes.
For,
Yes.
our other program. that we
Yep.
didn't mention.
Yeah, we have working with restoring 11 parks with
Great.
helping them. They have a landscaper, but in the community involvement and education.
We had one other question. Have you contacted Audubon to assist with any bird ID projects?
We haven't directly, but my coworker Jessie Allstat, I believe, is part of
She's
the.
part of the Audubon, and
Audubon
yes,
Society.
yeah,
She's a good asset.
we've worked in the past with signage. So the signage that is in Port Hueneme, the pier, we made that, and they helped us, our guidance, who I think it's just Cynthia, Cynthia and I were stretched thin all the time with
Yeah.
time, but we're on the same mind frames, and we refer to each other, and if we have a question, technical question, we go to them. We'd love to work with them. I think they would want to work with us. It's a matter of, well, like the day only has 24 hours, but it's a matter of time in finding those spots. But we have collaborated with Paso Pacifico. Work closely with Port Hueneme in supporting us, helping us along the way. We had the first, was the second World Oceans Day event on June, and unfortunately it was this canoe thing going on at the same time. I thought it would be drawing more people, but the opposite, because there was so much traffic. But we held it with Pacifico hosting it, support from Port Hueneme. So we hope to get that going, keep it going, to bring more awareness about ocean protection, since it's 73% of the world. But we're happy to work with Earth Day as well. Bias towards green blue.
Yeah.
So yeah, just the rest are compliments and saying you guys are doing a great job and thanking you for your presentation. So yeah, thank you again. Thank you for making the time to come here. We really appreciate it. I had been following you guys on social media for a while. I knew you guys are doing cool stuff. So yeah, I'm very glad we were able to get you here today.
Good invite.
Yeah, and we're gonna take a short break. We'll be back at 10. I want to give you guys a decent bathroom break. We'll be back at 10:15 to continue with our next presentation, which is going to be harmful algae bloom from the Southern California Coastal Observing System. So hang in, go get your glass of water, and I'll see you guys in a little bit.
Things a long time ago as well.
Okay, thank you everyone for tuning back in. We are returning with our next presentation. Very excited for this. I guess you can introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I'm Clarissa Anderson. I'm the director of the Southern California Coastal Ocean Observing System at Scripps Institution of Oceanography at UC San Diego.
And let me make sure I do this right.
Yeah, just make sure you know all your dirty laundry.
That's yours, right? I think this is it.
That looks like it. We just got to go to the top. We're doing the opposite of bearing the lead here.
This one?
We're jumping to the punchline. Let's go up, hit the top, hit screen, slideshow. We should be good to go.
Okay.
Okay,
All
everyone
yours.
can see that all right online?
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, I'll give you a little background on our organization, SCOOS, as a prelude to the story about the current harmful algal bloom that we've been experiencing along the coast. And this will hopefully contextualize some of the data collection we do. Like I said, we're at UC San Diego, and we are actually part of the academic program at UC San Diego. There are 11 of these regional associations that are part of this integrated ocean observing system in the US run by NOAA, but we are not feds. In fact, all of these regional associations are considered sort of stakeholders of IUCE, if you will. It's a little bit of a strange concept, but we're more part of the extramural funding program. The rest of the funding funds HQ in Silver Spring. We compete on 5-year cycles for 5 years chunks of money to sustain these regional ocean observing systems. So frankly, this is where the ocean observing is actually happening, is at the regions, but we're not part of we're just part of this grander federal enterprise. And there are 2 of us in California, SCOOS and SCOOS, Central and Northern California Ocean Observing System, and we share around the Morro Bay and Cal Poly area, fund work in the Cal Poly. And as the regional ocean observing system, you guys have someone that's not
going into the dealer going, we love Hondas, we want to buy a Honda. That's a poor negotiating.
you're gonna have to
They're not charging the $6,000.
you know that.
I don't know, but it would be good to know, drop stuff like that.
Yeah, so anyway, we don't do all this sort of stuff. You're going to see I also have a pretty small staff, but one way we make it work is that we're funding scientists throughout the region at all the different academic institutions, Cal State, UC. Now, will it advance is the question. Maybe let's use that. Yeah, that's fine. So that's us. There are also just, this is maybe too much in the weeds for today, but just so you're aware, you may get confused at times. You may be approached by or hear about the West Coast Ocean Alliance, in part because they are doing a lot of tribal stewardship lately. They are called regional ocean partnerships because we're talking about this funding opportunity, the Coastal Resilience Challenge, that comes from the Office of Coastal Management. ROPs are part of that branch of NOAA. We are part of this other branch within the National Ocean Service called IUCE. And I wouldn't say nary the twain shall meet, but some of the regional associations of IUCE are actually the ROP for their region, just to confuse you and blow your mind. We are not. So all 3 of us on the West Coast are separate from this West Coast Ocean Alliance. So the funding streams are doing this and nobody knows what's happening. So those are the ones that overlap. This is my group. I've got a deputy, I have a data scientist, a part-time outreach coordinator. In fact, I just gave her your information for MERITO because fascinating, we would love to collaborate. And we have a lot of the same partners, of course. I have another data scientist and biological oceanographer like myself, Kasia Kennitz, who works for us. And we've got a little bit of overlap with the Coastal Data Information Program. So that's where this employee Ross comes in. That is the WAVE program. It's a national program, mostly funded by US Army Corps. And then we have certain of our leadership staff that help guide me. Lai Washburn is here at UC Santa Barbara. Dan Rudnick is at Scripps, and you'll hear more about them. And then we have a really big tie to radar, and I'm going to get back to that. We do a lot, not unlike you all, but we're doing this maybe over a larger domain and really far off the coast. So we're collecting a full range of core variables that fit into kind of global directives and what one might collect to have a fully resolved oceanographic system that can do physics to higher trophic levels. And every day we are also building our capacity through lots and lots of extramural funding in order to grow the pie outside of what we get from US IUs. We have a lot of course, fun bureaucratic stuff that we could get into, how our systems come together. There are these subsystems. We do everything from the ocean observing and the engineering to the data management and cyber infrastructure. So it's kind of a soup to nuts sort of thing where we do the data collection, the QC, and the product development with stakeholders. We also run a whole lot of real-time and delayed mode models of circulation and other ecological forecasting. And we're trying to do the stakeholder management, which really turns into, I think, as you can certainly appreciate, it's almost infinite when it comes to how many groups and people you can engage with. It really never ends, and you have to figure out how to prioritize that if you have small staff. But we are engaging with global to local stakeholders, in part because we have the largest high frequency radar network in the world. This is doing surface current measurements in real time. So these get ingested into search and rescue models. It gets ingested into oil spill response models. So when we have something like the Huntington oil spill, we're one of the first responders on the scene to make sure these data are getting into the trajectory models. So US Coast Guard and of course different oil spill responders are a huge stakeholder there, but we also work with the military. We work with MPAs because larval connectivity models rely on this kind of radar data that gives you the real-time and delayed surface currents. We also have a huge partnership with Cal Coffee. So the lines that are kind of dominating the plot you're seeing here are the longstanding California Fisheries Investigation Cooperative data that's been going back, since the 50s. We put gliders on multiple Cal Coffee lines. So we have autonomous underwater gliders that are going out maybe 100 kilometers offshore and 1,000 meters deep on an operational basis. So there's always a glider out there 24/7 collecting mostly physical and biogeochemical data of the ocean to get an understanding of heat content. What does Southern California look like relative to the equator? How can we know when we have an El Nino what the response is going to be in the Southern California bight? Stuff like that. So all of these things paint a big picture. We work very closely with fisheries. Then getting more close to shore, we have shore stations at just about every pier in California, every public pier. We've got 5 of these that we maintain in Southern California with fully resolved real-time hydrography, biogeochemistry, and biology. And that's where we do weekly harmful algorithm sampling and toxin sampling. This is just a little smattering of our stakeholders. I like it's what people like to these days say, it's an eye chart. So you can just see though, we also are on the Hill a lot. So it is kind of this end-to-end outreach portfolio in that we do directly go to the Hill every year and make bespoke materials for every district, go to those staffers and try to advocate for ocean science to the best we can. I have limitations on my own ability to lobby, and so we bring people who can do that part, but we are there kind of collating the information in a way that resonates for a given district. This is a little picture that gives you maybe a little better sense than that bird's eye view map of what we're doing. This tells you what we fund now, and this is a lot of different stuff. We've got ocean acidification work here, marine mammal seabird surveys, you name it. We work with the Port of LA, Port of Long Beach to bring ships in. This is the underkeel clearance project. It goes on. And we have a vision. Well, I thought that was the next slide. This is just Southern California. We have a vision of where we want to go. And that's what these black icons represent. In fact, we've just started funding white shark telemetry. So we're working with the Shark Lab at CSU Long Beach to ensure that he has enough buoy receivers that the sharks he has tagged get noticed by lifeguards. And we have, those real-time alerts that go out to lifeguards at the beach. Whatever we do, we want it to be stakeholder driven. That is sort of a fundamental tenet of IUS. We're not just going out and saying, let's fund our favorite scientists to do something that may be applied. There has to be a true application and a need, and it has to be an articulated need. So of course, harmful algae are a very articulated need. And it also just so happens that I stepped into this role, and my whole career has been about predicting and forecasting harmful algal blooms. So I walked into managing a large system, yet a system that always already prioritized sampling for harmful algal blooms. And we really would love to improve that sampling. We already have. I'll get into that in a minute. We've been able to add a lot of instruments to this endeavor, but we would love to do more things with the marine mammal monitoring side. It's just we haven't quite gotten there with funding yet, but it's really germane to the story that I'm going to tell you today. So one of the things we have managed to do, and you'll see some of the data in a bit, is add imaging flow cytobots. These are robotic microscopes that we've now put at every pier in California. We have 12 of them in the network, so also the biggest network in the world of these. It's kind of like we got the state money and it was just enough money to hang ourselves with, and like now we have to maintain these things, and they're absolutely brutal to maintain. Probably the most complex instrument I've ever worked with, because they're designed to go subsurface, look at the full phytoplankton community every 30 minutes, and then we tune the machine learning algorithms to do the classification. And so then really, truly, you know, and that kind of frequency, everything that's there. And so you can see if a potentially harmful taxon is increasing or decreasing. And then, of course, adaptively sample for the toxin, because the holy grail of harmful algae is knowing the toxin. You know, unless you're dealing with, say, something that's like a fish killing dinoflagellate, and of course, like in where you're from, like Baja Aqua Farms, they're dealing with things like dinoflagellates that directly kill fish, and that's what they can care more about. But I think in general, what we care about are the things that's going to get into the shellfish and kill us, right? So getting into what's been happening since the end of May, and actually is still kind of just now starting to peter out here in the Santa Barbara Channel region, is this influx of animals that you no doubt were quite aware of. And I think that's why I was invited to speak today. You know, this has been a really big event that has mostly affected California sea lions and dolphins. And I will speak to some of the complexity of how we have to deal with these marine mammal impacts in a second. But this also happened, just as a side personal note, this happened while I was in Paris, and I thought I was unplugging for 6 weeks, just to like work, but not work, you know what I mean? But this happened, and we had to immediately jump into action as an observing system to, you know, it was a call to arms, in part because the marine mammal rescue groups have a pretty close collaboration with us, not just Scoots, but me personally, because of the longevity of my work in this space, which is, you know, trying to understand specifically domoic acid events. And that's what this was. So you probably all know this already, but it's a neurotoxin. And so when you see the animals seizing on the beach or even being lethargic, it's because of that overexcitation at their neurons from domoic acid, which is not an acid, but it looks just like glutamic acid, which is an amino acid. And so it's basically just replacing that amino acid in the brain, in our systems. And so we're just as susceptible to it through shellfish consumption, but the way it manifests in us typically is your usual kind of almost like norovirus symptoms, but then amnesia, short-term memory loss, stuff like that. You can get all the way to anaphylactic shock, and that's how people would typically die. We've never had a death in California from domoic acid, which is great, only from another toxin called saxitoxin. But these were the kind of things that were happening. We were trying to sort of understand it as it was unfolding, and that can be a very chaotic situation, particularly because the marine mammal folks are so overwhelmed in their volunteer networks, and they think they probably thought they were going on vacation too, and the next thing they know, they go to respond to one animal, and they have 30 more phone calls while they're responding to that animal. And that was the kind of thing that was happening just, you know, overnight. It was like right before I left for Paris, I talked to Ruth Dover, who runs the Channel Islands and Marine Wildlife Institute, and she's telling me, okay, we got 6 animals last week. I don't panic. I'm hoping this isn't a big deal. And I'm like, well, I'm going to Paris. Just kidding. I didn't say that, but I was like, you know, shoot, I really hope it's not. And I don't have a crystal ball per se to tell you what's going to happen. But, you know, sure enough, I would say a week later, it became quite clear that we were dealing with a pretty big domoic acid event, but they'll call it suspected until they can get a read on the tissues and know that it's truly DA, because really marine mammals do suffer from a lot of things. And there's a lot of viruses that are getting into the ocean now that can have overlapping symptoms, and we have to be somewhat cautious when we deal with this. But, you know, truly, if you see all of these things happening simultaneously, and they really were, you can pretty much say without without fail that that's what's going on. So they were treating the animals that they were bringing in. Most of them had to be euthanized on site because it was such an acute event. But the ones that can be treated, these are the kinds of things they'll do: flush their stomachs, give them anti-seizure medication. But there's no cure. It's really about waiting it out and trying to rehabilitate these animals. But I will say that most animals that do have this really acute exposure will go back out into the ocean and probably restrand many times over the course of their life, in part because of the way this affects the brain and the memory centers and the ability to forage offshore, and that disorientation that ensues. But because this was early in the summer, a lot of the animals that were stranding were pregnant. The dolphins were pregnant. They were baby dolphins. I didn't see any of this luckily myself because it sounds pretty horrible, but people were really emotionally affected by going to the beach and seeing all these animals. And as all of this proceeded into June and went into 4th of July weekend, that's when the media really started to panic because they knew people were going to be encountering these animals. And there were a lot of attacks. I think at least 30 reports of people being bitten by sea lions, sometimes when they were swimming. And that's where the rescue organizations can't go in the water and take an animal. They can only bring it in if it's on the beach. And so, like in the LA area, in fact, one of the scientists that we work with to do some of the algae work at UCLA, one of her good friends was in the emergency room. Very serious fight going to the beach because they're very erratic. When they're sick like this, they get aggressive. And one of the challenges with these, you'd be shocked because we've had these blooms now going on for 25 years or more, 30 years in this California current area. But what's still a struggle is the communication between all these disparate. They're not disparate. There is a network of marine mammal stranding groups, but they're not really affiliated. They're not all talking to each other. And we've been trying to play that role during these blooms to help connect the dots and be a little bit of an early warning system, because these first strandings happened in Ventura, then they moved into the rest of the Santa Barbara Channel area. Then we started to hear about a few in the SLO region. Then we started to hear about more and more in LA and Orange County, and then San Diego. And so this was sort of how it was unfolding, but I'm not 100% sure, but I don't think the folks in San Diego were completely ready for this. And that's even our failing, because we don't have a codified system yet for getting this out. We have emails, but trust me, when you do an email chain that you just wrote out, think about how many people you accidentally missed because your hard drive is full and you can't remember all the names of people that you're supposed to be reaching out to. So it needs to be a little bit more of a codified system than it is now, and we are working on that. That's all I can say. So this was the other struggle. We do monitor for harmful algae, and I did tell you about these really cool robotic microscopes, but I also told you how hard they are to deal with. And of course, 3 out of the 4 in Southern California were broken when this bloom happened. So they were out for maintenance. And so I couldn't look at those images from a distance as I would have wanted. What we did have in semi-real time, I'm going to say with like a week to 2 week delay, were the cell counts from the pier sampling, which happens at these 5 piers: Scripps Pier, Newport Beach Pier. The map is being cut off here, but Stearns Wharf in Santa Barbara, nothing in Ventura. It goes from Santa Monica to Wharf, then Cal Poly Pier. We do also have a model. So this was something I spent a huge part of my career working on, was this forecast that's now a NOAA forecast. And it gives you a 3-day probabilistic forecast of not only the chance of encountering a bloom in a given pixel, but the toxin. And I'll show you the toxin model in a minute. But here it's really just focused on the diatom called Pseudonychia that produces this neurotoxin. But I wish I could just say we could just look at Pseudonychia in the microscope and know what's going to happen. There are many, many species of Pseudonychia. Only some of them produce toxin. There are 2 size classes. When we're doing this with a light microscope, we just say big or little, and we assume that the big ones are the ones that are going to produce toxin. It doesn't always work that way. And in fact, as we were looking at these data, I know it's really hard to see this map, but the first few humps that you're seeing in this time series, those are April. So this is before the time in question. Most of those humps are the more toxic group that was apparently blooming in April, along with the sort of seasonal coastal upwelling timeframe. Kind of expect that in Southern California, especially Santa Barbara. As you move forward into the next little like blue hump you're seeing is mid-May. That is a little spike of the skinny, smaller, less toxic group at Cal Poly. And in fact, we were ignoring those. And when this started to happen, we get these massive spikes in that particular group at the Cal Poly pier. But we were sort of, again, not telling the media, we were sort of saying to the media, you know, this doesn't seem to be a nearshore bloom. We're not seeing this at our nearshore sites, in part because we were only seeing the non-toxigenic group, or at least what we thought was the non-toxigenic group. And it doesn't mean that the bloom originated at the shore. We just don't know. In fact, the first little red blip you see there, which is the end of June, that's Stearns Wharf. And that's the first time we see the toxic group of Stugnitia at Stearns Wharf. And those animals have been stranding since late May. So there was a bit of forensics that had to be done. And there was definitely miscommunication, certainly on my part, to the media, because we were in some way stabbing in the dark. We didn't have the toxin analysis yet from these piers. It takes about a month. But what we knew were animals, particularly dolphins. Hundreds of dolphins are coming in dead. And dolphins don't feed right up against the coast typically. They're feeding offshore. So my assumption, and to this day, I will maintain that this was mostly an offshore event. Where it originated is a little hard to say right now. But if you look at the toxin, this is the domoic acid data, again, small plot. The little first hump, that's April. So that was the most toxigenic group of the species, but it really never reached anything that we would consider a very high value. As you march towards May, you get another blue blip there, approaching 0.5 nanograms per mil. That is Cal Poly. And that is at the time that the less toxigenic group is blooming. It's DA, but it's not very high DA. The first one that really hits almost the marker 0.5 where we would get concerned, that's Stearns Wharf, but it happened right after Cal Poly, which hit this very high number, right at the same peak as that non-toxigenic group bloom. So there's a lot for us to figure out because the genomics of these organisms is complex and there's strain specificity that we don't even understand yet. And that's where the predictability of this stuff is hard. And the only reason we have a model here on the left doing the domoic acid probability for the region was going off the whole time is that, with red being higher probability, is because we really used, at the time that we were developing these models, we were using some of the lowest hanging fruit you could do. You could say, what can you get optically from remote sensing? So a lot of the work I've done is on that bio-optics side. What can you do with remote sensing data that constrains statistically the chance of having this toxin in the water and what we're seeing from satellite? Not meaning the satellite gets a smoking gun signal that tells you domoic acid in the water, more like, can you sample the heck out of something for 10 years and have a really good statistical model, just like you would do with machine learning. In fact, those are machine learning models. We've always been doing machine learning. It's just even a linear model or a logistic model like what this is a type of machine learning. But what we were doing was saying, can we take a circulation model, remote sensing, merge all this together and have some skill in predicting this toxin? And that's what this model is. It's not looking at nutrients. It doesn't even incorporate nutrients. We know they're important. They're hugely important. We have other models where we can see the importance of nutrients, but if you want something right now, where everything is looking synoptically at the ocean in real time, there is nothing that's going to give you nutrients in real time. So it's almost sometimes, I think, a miracle that this model works at all, but it does seem to have pretty good skill, particularly for stranding animals. It gives you this kind of synoptic picture of the region, and animals are foraging that kind of large space. If you want to use this model to tell you if the shellfish at, Bernard Friedman's site in Santa Barbara Channel are toxic, you're going to fail because that's a much harder thing to do, to estimate. And when this bloom was happening, certainly at the height of it, we were putting together some easy access web applications for the Marine Mammal Stranding Network so that they don't really have the expertise in their group or the time to find and hunt for those model fields that go out through various NOAA channels. So we were putting all those maps together, collating the media outlet, I would say publications, any data that was coming in, we were trying to keep it there for them because all they wanted was truly just the tiniest light in the tunnel. And sadly, most of the maps were just this like red for a month and a half. And so there really wasn't. And when we were being asked by media when this might end, I think the best guess, and it seems to be true, was that when we sort of exit this very intense, strong upwelling regime that we were in for that entire period, which I think was fueling the bloom. And what it looked like to me, and I haven't truly delved through all the physical oceanographic data yet, but what it looked like was we were having really intense upwelling coupled with long periods of warming, more upwelling, more warming, and you get this cycle of injected nutrients from deep water, followed by warming, which the plankton really like in terms of sort of getting that, reaching a certain temperature where they just reach maximal growth. And the nutrients are being depleted in just the right way to cause stress on the plankton. But that's not the only recipe for getting the kind of marine mammal response that we have. You have to have the animals feeding in the right place, and you have to have the right vectors in the food web getting it to those animals. And so one of the things we're trying to understand is if it was mostly a squid vector. Squid are becoming a really dominant source of prey for sea lions. Dolphins love squid. When we did this, not we, but when our partners did the stomach content analysis, what they found was nothing, which is pretty typical with this toxin. The animals will just throw it all up. They'll empty their guts so that now your forensics is even harder. But there were a lot of anchovy otoliths, so little ear bones of the anchovies, but that could just be the prey of the squid. So we don't know who was the vector in this case. However, we did find insanely high domoic acid concentrations in the dolphin tissue. And when we had a bloom like this last August, if you remember, we also had a very big sea lion mortality event last year. We also saw the highest concentrations of domoic acid in sea lion feces that we've ever seen. And so while it's hard for me to say whether these blooms are getting worse, I will say that every time we have one and we do the measurements, we start to break records. We break records almost every time we measure either the water or the animals. So it's pretty scary. These are the kind of images you can get from those robotic microscopes. Like I said, we didn't have any really working. We had one on a mooring called Delmar Mooring in San Diego. And I was looking at that every day, and I would see some of the pseudonychia cells spike, but never really at the level that you would expect for the kind of mortality that we were seeing. What you're seeing in this picture here is mostly dinoflagellates. Those ones that look like little hearts, that's called Florocentrum. It's not considered too harmful, but we monitor it as a potential harmful group. And so a typical field looks like this. This is the region of showing all the regions of interest, and you'll get, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these a day. And then you have to then distill that information into the abundance estimates of abundance of those organisms. We work with the California Department of Public Health, of course, and just to make that story about what was happening along the coast more complex, if you look at these rings and you home in just for red would be that highest abundance of that most toxigenic class of diatom. It never even got red at San Luis Obispo. So that was always pretty much just this less toxigenic class. It did get red in Santa Barbara, and we only saw that at the end of June, and I believe that's what they saw as well. So it took a long time, and if you start to think about how blooms develop along the coast, there is, of course, a connection to watersheds. But in this particular instance, we have no rain, there's no discharge. To me, it really speaks to a strongly oceanographic phenomenon. It doesn't mean that these blooms are disconnected from watersheds. In fact, when places like Monterey Bay, it's well documented that if you have a big discharge event from, say, Pajaro River onto an existing bloom, toxin will spike. So there is something about anthropogenic nutrients that contributes to more toxin production, but you'd have to have all of that happening simultaneously. And in this case, it was pretty dry. But if you remember how gloomy June was, that is a good indicator of upwelling. That upwelling was very strong. And we look at the index of upwelling, particularly the index that tells you how much nutrients is coming into the system for primary productivity. It was anomalously high the last 2 years compared to the entire record that we have going back to the early 90s. Really, really high. So we have a lot of homework to do. So the correlation is that fog is a good indicator of upwelling, because as you go into summer, and the land is heating up, and you start to get upwelling as a result of the northwesterly winds, that differentiate the difference, that gradient from really cold upwelled water to warm land gives you fog. And so the fact that there was such an intense marine layer is a good indicator that there was a lot of upwelling. And when we look at the index of upwelling, indeed, it shows that it was very high all throughout Southern California.
Was that just the month of June?
No,
July?
starting, I would say in April, May, June.
It was foggy the whole.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole time.
Yeah.
Like that.
And I was looking at that time series yesterday, and I was really impressed at how kind of around the 2000, when I started working on these blooms in 2000, it was about that was the inflection point when we started seeing them all the time in California. And if you look at that, there's a huge inflection in the upwelling index at that point too. A lot of things happened in the ocean, not just at the equator, but in the Eastern Pacific, where there is an incredible step change around 2000. And we're all still scrambling to understand what that step change was. It's correlated to some indices, some oscillations. It's not correlated to others. And we do see cycles. You know, we see cycles associated with the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. We see some cycles, and so not strong.
So not ENSO?
Yeah, not so strong with ENSO, although the media likes to say it a lot, that El Nino is associated with these blooms. Not true. Statistically, it doesn't add up. The Northern Pacific Gyre Oscillation is another important one that is on a shorter frequency than, a higher frequency than the Pacific Decadal Oscillation. And it is correlated really well with nutrients being upwelled in the California current on these shorter timescales, and that correlating to blooms. So there is something there to tease out, but I can't help but think that things are just getting worse. Regardless of this, it feels like this is happening. And so it is hard, and I think we all appreciate the statistics of teasing out a sinusoidal signal from a linear trend that's just going up when you only have 30, 40 years of data to look at. You can't do that very easily. But we did apply for NOAA event response funding while this was happening. We had done this last summer as well, and in previous years when we've had these events. It's really modest pots of money, but they do help work with groups like Channel Keepers, try to get boats out to get offshore samples. I did my PhD at Santa Barbara, so we have a close collaboration with folks there who do the Plumes and Blooms cruises, monthly. In fact, they're going out 2 days on the Shearwater. And interestingly, when they went out on that Plumes and Blooms cruise in early June, they hardly saw any Stugnacia out there. So that was making me even more confused. And sadly, in this particular instance, almost everyone's boats were broken when we got this funding, even Channel Keepers. Nobody had a boat that was working. So we did manage eventually to get some stuff, but nothing great. And then also characterize the tissue, because it sounds like something we would take for granted, that all these tissue would just end up going to the right labs and get analyzed. There aren't the resources to do that. And so in order to have extra resources to help the marine mammal folks get the tissue, save it in a freezer, and then mail it to the right lab, and then get those analyses done so that we can characterize this is good. And we also keep samples for stable isotope analysis so that we can do kind of a food web forensics approach to looking at the compound specific isotope signal just for amino acids. It tells you a lot about who's feeding on what and how these toxins got transferred through the food web and where the animals acquired the toxin, because actually those signals, those isotope signals, change from south to north. You can actually see where an animal acquired the plankton that they ate based on the nitrogen signal. You can see, did they get it in San Diego or did they get it in San Francisco? Yeah, pretty cool stuff, but it takes a lot of work and money, and it's always funny, I'm sure you all appreciate when you try to publish something like this, the first thing a reviewer is going to say is, it's like a very well thought out study. And you're like, well, it wasn't. We did everything we could to just capture some information on the fly. And this was last year's event. And so this was a little bit better in terms of the event response, and that boats were working. A lot of the imaging flow cytobots were working. I know this is really hard to see, but that image of cells is from a cow coffee cruise that was in the Santa Barbara Channel at the same time. And another project that I'm on that's really more about understanding triggers of domoic acid production. They happen to be out there with their imaging flow cytobot. And so all those long spindly things you're seeing there, that's Signitia. They're long chains of diatoms. And that is a very nice image because it's showing you what a bloom of Signitia would look like if you were out in the Santa Barbara Channel and collected a water sample. What was more interesting though is from the plumes and blooms transect up above here, you're seeing domoic acid measurements from the surface to, actually no, those are across the channel. But the one in the middle, station 4, that's actually at depth. And that was a very deep sample, and it was our highest domoic acid sample. So not very, very deep, but the chlorophyll maximum. And this is one of the things that confounds us a lot is these animals are diving and they're acquiring toxin in the subsurface, a place where we're obviously not resolving or measuring most of the time. And that model, that sea harm model I showed you earlier, it's relying on surface fields from remote sensing. So it might correlate what's happening in like the chlorophyll maximum, but it's not going to tell you what's happening.
So the peak on green.
The peak on green, that is the Signitia toxic side class at I think that's turns 4. Oh no, sorry, those are the animals. That's right. We put the animal plot in this one instead. So those are just the strandings. That's the peak in strandings. And this event, it was 400 plus sea lions. This year we've had 1,000. And we've had this event last August was around 30 dolphins, I think, and this year it's over 100. So could I tell you what the difference is? Well, this happened in August. Upwelling in August in Santa Barbara Channel region is rare. It happens. And when it happens, it's happening around Point Conception. When you get really high wind stress curl around Point Conception and it blows into the Western Channel and the animals like at San Miguel start to acquire toxin that way. And that's probably what happened in this case. And while this also lasted a month, longer than a month, it may have led to less devastating consequences because it wasn't like upwelling was strong for the whole Southern California bite the way it was this time. Yeah. So we have a bulletin. I don't know if you
in the water.
Oh yeah, it has been really cold. Yeah, but then Florida is super hot. So then the media comes to us and I was like doing something last week, like, is it warm here? Like, well, that's a really hard thing to answer because it actually, the baseline levels right now are warm. If you look at the coast and you see upwelling spikes, they're going to tell you a different story. And so you have to try to tease apart that story of what's happening over the entire California current. We're actually above a baseline that may be an indication of climate and warming, but we also are going to have these spikes and changes at the coastline that are high frequency and that are an indicator of processes like upwelling. And you just because you hear on the news that oceans are at their warmest doesn't mean you're going to go out to the ocean right now, put your foot in and feel warm water. And that's what that's the expectation that people have. We have this bulletin. I encourage you to sign up for it. It's a public monthly listserv. I wish it were a forecast, but what this is mine and our attempt to piece everything together into a retrospective and tell a story about every month. Right now I'm working on one. I didn't do it all for May, June, and July. I'm going to work on one that just tells this story, but it collates state data, marine mammal data, our data, etc. And yeah, we work with NOAA. They did a needs assessment. They talked to a lot of different stakeholders to see what people want. They're trying to improve it. And that's all I have. I probably went over, but thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. I had all these questions, and you like answered all of them for me. If anyone here has any questions, and if you're on the chat, you can also type in your questions.
So specific data loss information has to correlation with the upwelling frequency.
Yes. So Pacific decadal oscillation and upwelling intensity are linked. Yes.
So when it goes positive, there's more upwelling, or when it
Yeah,
goes
that's the
negative?
right direction. I always forget. I think negative is more upwelling, but it could be wrong. When I do it, I'm not thinking too much about the directionality of the sign, just the opposite directions of the sign. But PDO kind of has an inflection point at around 36 north. So the dimodal distribution of PDO is kind of above 36 or below 36. So you won't see that kind of variability below 36 that you might expect between here and the northern California current, like in Oregon, Washington.
This is really strong correlation, big range. it goes positive, we
PBO
almost always have. big rain.
does have a ring correlation. El Nino doesn't. So that's another one where the media gets that confused. For Southern California, there is no statistical correlation between El Nino rain and precip. Only for NorCal and further north. So you'll hear that a lot because we're going into El Nino year. We're actually not necessarily going to see more rain. La Nina, though, is statistically correlated with drought in Southern California. So that's the difference.
I don't really.
Yeah.
Impact.
That's why we have such a productive ecosystem, right? It is the upwelling. And one thing I like to point out, because I think it's easy for us to use our kind of anthropomorphic view of this. This is devastating, but it's devastating because we like sea lions and we like dolphins. If you only liked anchovy, you would love this bloom because the anchovy are sitting pretty out there. They eat these plankton, they get the toxin, they're not necessarily really affected. They're not getting it at they're not accumulating it at the level that would affect them. Sometimes they show erratic behavior, but it doesn't hurt them. So if you just cared about other animals that are eating anchovies, other fish, like let's say you just cared about sharks who are eating some fish that are eating anchovies. Sharks are probably doing well. They're only doing well until they eat a sea lion that's sick. And we have no record what's happening with sharks because when they die, they just sink out of the water column. They don't wash up typically. But white sharks are out there eating sea lions in abundance, and there's no doubt that they're getting affected. What's that?
And they eat squid.
And they ate squid. And so this toxin only affects vertebrates. I probably should have said that at some point. So a squid won't be affected when the shellfish acquire it. I didn't even talk about the shellfish part of the story, which is also very strange. But when the shellfish acquire it, they don't get sick, but we are then at risk from eating the shellfish because they're filtering so much water that they will acquire a lot of toxin unless they're flushing it out quickly. And in this particular event, the only place that had a shellfish advisory for this toxin during this bloom was Santa Barbara County. Slow County never had it. They had one for the other toxin, saxitoxin, which is a totally different organism. And the rest of Southern California didn't have one. So that just adds to the complexity. Why did only shellfish pick it up? Because you have to have it be long enough in one place. And what Santa Barbara Channel has oceanographically is an eddy this time of year that keeps things in the channel. So one of the reasons the Santa Barbara Channel is so incredibly productive. There's a new paper that just came out even showing how much that eddy really does contribute to this. Like you get upwelling, but you retain that upwelling within the channel. So it's really interesting, and it may very well be why Santa Barbara is almost always a hotspot for these blooms. Yeah. I didn't. I probably should have. No, but I didn't. No.
Did you just start back? You have a jet lag?
Yeah. I mean, come back, please.
I have a couple questions in the chat. Someone wants to know, why does size indicate toxicity?
Yeah, that actually is a really good question. It just comes down to the evolution of this genus that there's kind of these two big groups. One has the fatter, longer cell size. The other has skinnier, shorter cell size. And for some reason, the species in that bigger group tend to be the robust toxin producers. I don't think it's been adequately explained, but we now have a genetic basis for domoic acid production. A group at Scripps kind of resolved that synthetic pathway some years ago. And so the projects we have now are really meant to go out into the field and look at the strain specificity of the Sudnichia out there and look at what happens when the nutrients and temperature and salinity change in the ocean, what turns the gene on. So it's actually really cool technology because you can look at the transcriptomics in situ. You can see the genes turning on or turning off as the oceanographic conditions are changing. And we're doing this with long range AUVs and all kinds of fancy equipment. But what we're finding is there's more strains and species than we ever knew existed. Things I'd never heard of. They're getting identified every day. It's just like with bacteria. As soon as you start looking at the genomics, you find out there's way more diversity than you knew. So, and we're trying to understand which ones even cause toxin production. And so it's, I would say this small and large size class differentiation is, kind of like science circa 19th century, but that's kind of how we've been operating for a long time.
Other questions? Have you heard of recent Domoic acid poisoning in sea otters?
Not recent, so I mean, it does affect sea otters. There's some really well-known cases and events, and it can be a pretty large source of mortality for the sea otter population, which is still a small population. But I will say in this particular event, we didn't hear anything. The animal that was attacking surfers in Santa Cruz, it was just a stinker. From everything that I've heard, it's just an animal who got habituated to people and just started being irritating, as you know, weasels do. So that one, at first I thought, oh, could this be a Domoic acid case? But it turns out it was investigated and it was not. Yeah.
And then one last question here. How does that model work without nutrient input? You said it's a regression-based model. Is it purely from past observations and data?
Great question. Yes, it is. So those priors matter. As the system changes, it's hard to account for the kind of, I would say, nonlinear changes that we get in the ocean system. But it is based on just constraining years and years of toxin data with what the satellite sees and what circulation models see. So it is purely statistical and empirical in that sense, but it is well constrained because it was data that spanned over a decade. So we caught a lot of the dynamics in the system, but as those dynamics change and we get things like marine heat waves, we do start to see that skill level break down because we can't account for these future uncertainties, is what I would say.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. Is there any, for the Ventura watershed or
Yes.
this part of the county, any we could help with data collection and with
Absolutely. And so I was thinking about that. One of the things on the citizen science side, the way that the California Department of Public Health does their monitoring, and I should note all of the stuff I showed you, a lot of the stuff I showed you is this academic side of the equation. No decisions can be made from our data or our models. In the regulatory framework that is, say, California Department of Public Health that issues advisories for shellfish, or CDFW that issues advisories for finfish, they have to have specific chain of custody of the toxin data that they measure specifically. So they can use our stuff as alerts, early warnings. How do we ramp up? But when they need to ramp up, they don't always have the volunteers they need. And that's where a group like yours comes in, because you can go out and start getting much better resolution along the beach. I mean, I showed you some points of CDPH data in Santa Barbara Channel, but that's just a few places. It probably didn't even capture most of them, sure. They do have to weekly measure the commercial shellfish stocks. And that's how they keep us alive, because if you go to a restaurant, that's commercial. But there's so many recreational and subsistence harvesters that have no idea the risks they are taking, despite the signage and the advisories online. It's a complicated problem, and no one's ever studied it or quantified what that looks like. Yeah. For California. Yeah. Yeah, we just put a grant in to do that with OPC, but it didn't get funded. Yeah, to look at that subsistence equation.
it would be these like monitoring and commercial species.
Well, this would be
Sampling
it could be no, it could be as simple as water samples off piers, just net tows.
Okay.
It could be a lot of net tows, so they'll do the plankton counts from net tows, and you can even just get water samples for toxin to send them. But it sounds like you do some rocky intertidal and other work, so shellfish are always welcome as well. Yeah, bivalves, mussels mostly.
Yeah, like in general, it's depending on the tides.
Mhm.
Doesn't more restricted, but the piers and. something
Yeah.
can be with
And you can
curiosity.
get bivalves off the piers too.
Yeah,
Yeah, so I will definitely be linking you with people.
A couple more questions. The chat's going up. Can you speak to different species of algae as they relate to harmful algae blooms? I've heard concerns about algae in the watershed and how it might contribute to harmful algae blooms. And I will say this is from Jody from the Farm Bureau, and I've also gotten a lot of emails about algae in our watershed right now and
Absolutely.
how that affects.
Yeah, and so while I would love for the stories about what's happening in the ocean to be similar to freshwater, they aren't necessarily, but there is a connection at the land-sea interface. And so mostly what's happening in freshwater is cyanobacteria. There's a few different groups. You would have heard about microcystis. You'll hear about Anabina. You'll hear about a whole bunch of these different toxin producers that are often responsible for thick green mats at the surface of a freshwater body or in a river, particularly in pools. Those are really deadly. And if you remember when those people died in Merced region, the family that went hiking, and it turned out to be heat. So the state was heavily involved. WEHA, which works with CDPH, was heavily involved in that because there really was a strong hypothesis. And I was one of these people who strongly thought they had succumbed to like a really strong saxitoxin poisoning from not fully filtering fresh water if it was hot. But those are real risks that we have to think about all the time in freshwater bodies. The other thing is those cells, while they can't survive in the ocean, they will lyse the second they hit really high salinity. This toxin persists. And so sea otters, that came up earlier, sea otters are really susceptible to microcystins, which get into the ocean. And I have a colleague who did for a long time with every watershed at the mouth of every river in California was routinely sampling for microcystins, and they were always there. So they get into the ocean, they get into mussels. That's how the sea otters are getting it. They're eating mussels that are right at the land-sea interface. They're acquiring freshwater toxins from watersheds. It's fascinating. It's very understudied. So the connection between freshwater and marine is there. It's important. And microcystins not heavily regulated. FDA has no drinking water regulatory thresholds for microcystin, even though it's an incredibly deadly toxin. And that's what shuts down the Great Lake water systems all the time. Yeah. So they use the WHO advisory levels, but FDA is looking. It's a pretty interesting area, and it's one where watersheds really need to be sampled. State Water Board is much more connected to that sampling than, say, a group like mine, but we do try to interface with the State Water Board. And we have a lot of talk about how we might merge our data sets someday, but CDN, if you ever look at CDN,
Just to
I'm sure there's somebody on here. I'm gonna get in
piggyback
trouble.
off of that, so I just got someone that emailed me last week, and they were gonna take a field trip with kids to the watershed, and they were wondering if it's okay with the algae.
Well,
When I get email like questions like that, yeah, I feel bad.
You
if I
have to
give bad
monitor,
advice.
right? How do we know if we're not monitoring? This is the time of year, as soon as the waters get warm and it's summer, you're going to start getting a lot of these blooms, and they could be around any given time. I mean, if you actually start looking, you'll be horrified by how often those things are happening. We just don't have a lot of the state. Like I said, the state water boards do monitor watersheds, and they're probably monitoring yours, and you may know who those people are. But it might not be at the resolution that you could answer a specific person's question about where they live, what does it look like right here, right now.
Yeah, okay. And then we have a question from the city of Ventura. Do you need more monitoring in Ventura or Ventura Pier?
Yeah, we have nothing on Ventura Pier. I'm sure it would be wonderful. I think, again, I think that monitoring would be most useful to the state than to us, because then it can actually be used in some decision making. For us, it becomes a little harder because we have really stringent quality control rules in order for our data to be served by the big NOAA repositories. And we have to go through a lot of vetting every year to make sure that we are serving climate quality data, which is a very stringent process. If you want to have, if you want community scientists to really get involved, I think giving samples to the state is great because they will use it and it will tell them where they need to increase their sampling to understand the toxins. So that's what I would say is the best thing. And if anyone wants to know who those people are, we can always help make that connection.
Awesome. So you see her email on the screen, and you guys all get the meeting reminders and emails from me. So you can also, I can forward anything to her as well. Yeah, I think that's it for the question. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much. That was very informative. I had so many questions. And yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so I know that we have now gone over our time, you guys. Fortunately, my coworker Desiree, she's always with me, so she said she's fine just doing her presentation during our next meeting. But really quickly, Lynn, do you have any announcements you want to make?
Hi, everyone. Lynn Rodriguez, Watersheds Coalition. I just had a couple of really kind of quick things. Those of you that are, kind of more active in Watersheds Coalition, you may see that we've kind of slowed down a little bit while we are in transition with the program, and we'll have some sort of news to share with you later this summer about where that's going. We're transitioning the program away from the county as the host, and it will be hosted in the future by the Cayugas Municipal Water District. So there's a lot of administrative things to deal with on that. So I just wanted you to know that that's happening, and we are planning to have a general membership meeting at the end of September, hopefully on the 27th. That's the date that I've been looking at, and I'll be sending out a save the date for that. It's been a long time since we met as a whole group. A lot of different things have happened over these last few months, as you heard from Heidi about them taking on the Santa Clara River Watershed coordination, which is awesome. The county has been sort of slowly divesting themselves, if you will, of this role since RCD took on the role that had been filled by Laura Schellenbarger at the county. So changes are happening. These things are to be expected, I guess. Also, we have some pending legislation, and it has been tabled for the meantime, but 2 bills, an Assembly bill and a Senate bill, that included some additional funding for IRWM in the future. We've been lobbying for a certain amount of money, and one of the bills had $350 million for IRWM projects, and the other one had $300 million. I don't think it's going to go any higher than that. So that would be some funding on the horizon for projects like the ones that we've been, or the funding that we've been working with for so long now, since Prop 50. So kind of stay tuned on that. But in the meantime, this is a really good opportunity for us to look at what we've done in the program and in the watershed programs and how we want to work together going forward. And thank you to all of you that participated in the surveys that were conducted, the 2 for the Ventura and Santa Clara River Watershed, and then the one for WCVC. We're definitely taking that feedback into account as we plan for the future. And we do continue to work on the Disadvantaged Community Involvement Grant Program. And at sometime in the future, I can work with Heidi about when it would be appropriate to do kind of a final presentation about that effort. A lot of great stuff has happened, and I really appreciate Rocio's presentation on all the work you're doing. That's amazing. I had no idea the depth and breadth of everything that you're doing with youth and with communities. And I am very hopeful that when this grant that I'm working on, funded by Proposition 1, ends, that we will be able to transition a lot of that effort or combine so that we can work more closely with you or make sure that the water agencies in the county can connect with the work that you're doing, because I mean, it's amazing. Like I said, I had no idea. That's awesome. So just some things to come around post Prop 1 grant funding for underserved communities and tribal engagement. So thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Yeah. And before I end the meeting, we did talk at the previous meeting about the work plan and maybe having some field trips, maybe 1 or 2 field trips during the year. I would like before winter, so our next meeting will be in October, to have a field trip for everyone. If you have any locations that you want to offer up or just a suggestion, I welcome any suggestions from you guys. So thank you, and I will see you guys all again in October. Thank you for joining. Bye.